Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What is the ruling on maintaining wudu throughout the day? In other words, what's the ruling for keeping your wudu all day long? And I would imagine that the person intends thereby not to keep the same wudu all day long, because that may be a health hazard, but rather to always be in a state of wudu. Now, when it comes to what is compulsory, we understand that 5 times a day a Muslim must pray, and because we must pray 5 times a day, that means that there's at least 5 occasions during the day where we have to have wudu in order to pray. And under those circumstances, having wudu would be compulsory because the prayer is compulsory. But beyond that, to have wudu all the time is not something that the Sharia commands of us, but it is regarded as generally mustahab, generally recommended and encouraged, and something that is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hence the word mustahab, something that is sought to be beloved by Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal. And this would be the general ruling across madhahib. There were Sahaba like Bilal radiallahu ta'ala an, who would always renew his wudu. So whenever he broke his wudu, he would then renew his wudu and perform 2 raka'at. And the scholars of tasawwuf or tazkiyatun nafs generally always recommend that a person should try to be in the cleanest of states. So we should always try to be in a state of tahara, both in the major sense, so always having a ghusl, as well as in the minor sense, having a wudu. And the reason for that recommendation is often not connected with a particular type of ibadah that one needs to fulfill, but rather to be in a state that is most appropriate for a believer. And of course, being in a pure state is better than being in an impure state. While there's no sin on a person who does not have wudu, the person who does have this state of ablution and who does maintain his wudu for as long as possible, number one, is always ready for prayer, regardless of where he is, regardless of what circumstance he may find himself in. Number two, in terms of spirituality, being in a state of wudu also has a certain innate defense mechanism against oneself, one's nafs, and against shaitan, because we are in a purer state than to not have wudu. And therefore, scholars of Islamic spirituality would recommend that you try to maintain a state of wudu because it actually helps you to maintain your level of consciousness. It helps you to maintain abstinence from sin, and it helps you to remain strong against your own nafs. How does it do this? Well, there's a lot that happens in terms of the unseen world. Just like when we are in a state of siyam or fasting, when we are in a state of fasting, our conscious awareness is so much more active because we are acutely aware of the fact that there are certain things that would break our fasting. So a woman who is fasting, for example, or a man, they prepare their food and they go shopping, but they are extra alert about what they are doing with their hands and what they are consuming, what they put near their mouths, just in case they do something by accident and therefore break their fast. So similarly, a person who is in a state of wudu and is consciously keeping track of his state of purification or her state of purification, so they would know exactly where and when they would break the wudu, because they are trying to maintain a habit of having wudu all the time. So this level of extra consciousness assists one in being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also when we are mindful of Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal, that is essentially when shaitan withdraws, right? He is al-khannas, he's the one who whispers and withdraws. And according to our mufassirun, he whispers when the heart is unmindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he withdraws the moment that the heart becomes mindful of Allah and remembers Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal. Of course, the other benefit in maintaining wudu or always being in a state of wudu is that every time you perform wudu, you are performing an act of ibadah. Every time you perform wudu, you are washing away minor sins along with the dirt that you're actually washing away. The Prophet ﷺ actually gave a metaphorical explanation of the person who prays 5 times a day being like the person who washes or bathes 5 times a day. And he asked the Sahaba, would you think that such a person who bathes 5 times a day would have any dirt on them? And of course, it was a rhetorical question because such a person would be clean. So the Prophet ﷺ explained this is like the person who prays 5 times a day, salah, as it is desired to be prayed, as it should be prayed. Such a person will be spiritually clean all the time, because from one salah to the next salah is an expiation of whatever has transpired between that. So similarly, a person who is perpetually in a state of wudu, they are always engaged in this act that would wash away minor sins as well as cleanse the body. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.